All right, let's dive into one of the most important essays of the last decade or so. We're talking about Mark Andreessen's 2011 piece where he famously declared that software was eating the world. Now, this was a massive claim back then, and honestly, if you want to understand the business world today, you really have to understand what he was talking about.
And this is how he opened. 6 simple words. Software is eating the world. But man, this was like a bomb going off in the business community. It wasn't just a clever turn of phrase. It was a dead serious prediction about a complete economic takeover. The whole argument was that software was going to become the foundation of, well, pretty much every industry.
You got to remember what it was like in 2011. People were still super skittish from the dot-com crash just a decade earlier. So when they saw these new tech companies like Facebook and Twitter with these sky-high valuations, they immediately thought, oh no, here we go again. It's another bubble. The skepticism was really, really high.
But Andreessen's whole point was that everyone arguing about stock prices and valuations was totally missing the forest for the trees. His claim was about something way bigger, way more fundamental.
So here's the core idea. Forget the stock market for a second. This was about a deep, structural change in the economy. He argued that we were at this tipping point where major industries, from entertainment all the way to agriculture, wouldn't just use software anymore. No, they would be run by software, and they'd be delivered to you and me as online services.
And that leads to the obvious question, right? Computers and software had been around for decades. So why then? Why was 2011 supposedly the moment this huge software feast was really going to kick off?
Well, it turns out it was this perfect storm of 3 huge things happening all at once. First, you suddenly had a global marketplace of more than 2 billion people with broadband. Second, smartphones put the internet into everybody's pocket all the time. And third, and this is crucial, cloud computing made it ridiculously cheap to start a business that could reach that global audience.
And that point about cost? It was an absolute game changer. I mean, get this. Back in the year 2000, just to run a basic internet application, you were looking at about $150,000 a month. By 2011, thanks to things like Amazon Web Services, that cost had crashed to just $1,500. The door just blew wide open for anyone with an idea.
So after explaining why this was all happening now, Andreessen basically takes us on a tour of the crime scene, a rundown of all the industries that had already been taken over. Let's look at the evidence he laid out.
Exhibit A, books. This one is a classic. Can you believe that back in 2001, the bookstore giant Borders actually paid Amazon to run its online store? They thought it was just this tiny, unimportant sideline. What a mistake. They didn't realize Amazon wasn't a bookstore, it was a software and logistics company that just happened to sell books. And we all know how that story ended.
And then, of course, there's video. We all know this one. Blockbuster had thousands of stores, a massive empire built on physical tapes and DVDs, and it all got completely wiped out by Netflix. And what's Netflix at its heart? It's a software company that uses data to serve up content. The physical stores went from being an asset to a liability, like overnight.
You see the exact same pattern in the music industry. The big record labels, who used to control everything, suddenly found themselves as mere content suppliers. The real power, the companies that own the customer and the distribution, were now software platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Pandora. They became the new gatekeepers.
And the data here is just, wow, look at this. In 2004, digital music was a tiny 2% sliver of the industry's revenue. Just 6 years later, it had jumped to nearly a third of the entire pie. That's not evolution, that's a hostile takeover.
And hey, this wasn't just about entertainment. Take a huge industry like recruiting. We're talking $400 billion. The old way was all about who you knew, about headhunters with their private contact lists. Then along comes LinkedIn and basically creates a live, searchable resume for the entire planet's professional workforce. Game changed. But here's where the argument gets really mind-bending. It wasn't just about digital things like music or resumes. Andreessen argued that software was also becoming the secret brain behind the physical world.
Just think about it. Even back in 2011, your car was being run by software. The engine, the brakes, the GPS. The reason a giant like Walmart could even function was because of its unbelievably complex logistics software. Every single airline ticket price, every flight path, optimized by software. It was being used to find oil, to analyze soil and farming. It was this invisible intelligence layer running everything. This quote from the essay just nails it. It forces you to completely rethink what a company is. The real magic of FedEx isn't the fleet of planes and trucks. It's the software network that knows exactly where every single package is and the most efficient way to get it from A to B. The physical stuff is just the arms and legs attached to the software brain.
So, after this tour of all the industries that had already been devoured, the essay turns to the future. If software had already eaten all that, what was for dessert?
And he pointed his finger directly at two absolute giants of the economy: healthcare and education. These were industries that had famously been very, very slow to change. But in his view, they were the next logical targets for a total software-led revolution.
You know, this whole chaotic battle between the old guard and the new software insurgents, it's not a new idea. The economist Joseph Schumpeter had a great name for it way back in the day. He called it creative destruction. It's this messy but ultimately necessary cycle where new innovations rise up and destroy the old way of doing things, creating something new in its place.
Now, Andreessen wasn't just some starry-eyed optimist. He was very clear that this whole takeover wasn't going to be a walk in the park. He pointed out some big challenges. The economy was still pretty weak. There was this weird skills gap where tech companies couldn't find enough engineers, even with high unemployment. And of course, these new companies still had to actually, build a real business and earn their high valuations.
And that really brings us right up to today. Looking back, his essay was incredibly accurate, wasn't it? But the meal isn't over. Software is still hungry. So the same question he asked back in 2011 is the one we should be asking ourselves right now. When you look around, what industry do you think software is going to eat next?